Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because we're going to talk about 3 seismic challenges that contact centers of all types must face today. And not just today, but these are going to be ongoing things because it is that seismic shift. And we're going to have that discussion today with Nicole Kyle. Now, Nicole Kyle is the managing director and co-founder of CMP Research. She was born and raised in Rhode Island and is an only child. Nicole's been playing tennis since she's been 7 years old and loves to read fantasy books to escape. And she started her career in customer contact center research in 2012. Nicole joined CMP in November 2021 from Gartner, where she spent 8 years leading research and advisory. Nicole is known for her exceptional work in customer contact, future of workplace, and employee engagement, delivering frame-breaking insights and have supported critical decision-making across hundreds of enterprise-level leadership teams. And prior to Gartner, Nicole was a journalist and still maintains the natural curiosity of a journalist in her research. She works on publishing on gender equity, the gender wealth gap, women's relationship to money, and educating, what's that, normies?
Normies, probably, yeah.
Creators and historically excluded communities about crypto and Web3. She is the co-creator and co-host of I Also Want Money, a podcast to demystify and demasculinize and democratize wealth. She content creates to explore the intersection of money, equality, creativity, and technology. The historic concentration of wealth oppresses and excludes. Closing the gender, racial, and social wealth gaps is essential to derive real change. The legacy she is proud to leave behind includes contributing to positive change. She currently resides in Brooklyn, New York. Just as an interesting fact, is that she lived and worked in London for 5 years. Nicole Kyle, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I'm ready. Thanks for having me, Jim.
I appreciate that. Now, before we actually started talking, I gave you a little bit of background about my long-term tenure within the contact center industry and some of the things that we've talked about on the Fast Leader Show. And I said, wait a minute. I was actually started in the contact center industry back in the 1990s. I said, I don't even know if you were even thought of yet. But maybe you can help me actually close some of those gaps in regards to what I had the opportunity to, for many, many years, experience and try to lead through and manage through in contact centers, and what's currently, some of these seismic challenges that are issues. Because as you and I were talking about them, I'm like, well, these are some of the same things that have existed for a long time. But I think there's some sub factors and other drivers that are making it yet even quite different. So first of all, welcome. And if you could kind of run us quickly through those 3 seismic challenges, and then you and I will get the opportunity to dive into each one of those individually.
Absolutely. No, Jim, it's such a good point, and thanks again for having me. As we think about what's keeping customer contact leaders up at night, we know unequivocally it's agent engagement and agent retention right now. There's the talent market, the labor market feels different. And the 3 seismic challenges we'll talk about are really all being driven by one major seismic shift, and that is the normalization of flexible work in the contact center. So while turnover and attrition and engagement have been challenges to varying degrees for the past 40, 50 years, the way that those have become more urgent to solve and how we solve them is just going to be so different from what's always been. What's driving that is that normalization of flexible work. Now, with that normalization of flexible work, what are the 3 seismic challenges? How do we get this right? How do we get agent engagement correct in a world where working flexibly is now normalized in the contact center? It comes down to 3 things. Our research shows the top thing is manager dynamic. followed by operationalizing flexibility. So actually offering the type of flexibility that can work for agents personally. And then thirdly, the third most important factor is career development in the contact center. So that's what it boils down to. And looking forward to unpacking that with you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, because so for me, when you first introduced me to, the phrase of manager dynamic, I mean, I was very curious. I'm like, what does that mean? So I have to ask you, what is manager dynamic?
Yeah, we boil it down to, simply said, it's the quality of your direct manager in the contact center. So the term manager that I'm using, it really does scope in everyone from frontline supervisor level up to team lead level within the contact center, anyone who's directly managing people. When we say manager dynamic, we're talking about quality managers. To take that a step further, it's managers who can hit the outcomes they need to, the outcomes we all care about in customer contact, CSAT, AHT, first contact resolution, but also successfully engage and retain agents. So that definition of successful manager or highly effective manager has to expand to encompass a leader who can engage their team as well as hit those core metrics. And that's how we define a highly successful manager and a positive manager dynamic.
Well, and so this is kind of what what I was mentioning in regards to some of these issues that, and you even kind of alluded to it a moment ago, saying, 40, 50 years. But I had the opportunity to actually interview Jim Harder, who is the chief research scientist for Workplace for Gallup organization, who was the co-author of the book called "It's the Manager." And one of the things he said is that in 80 years of research by the Gallup organization, the number one contributing factor to engagement, performance, and all that is the relationship that somebody has with their immediate supervisor. So I guess you'd say this goes well beyond the contact center. And if we start talking about manager dynamic, I mean, how is any of this really going to change?
Yes. So it's so interesting because even in my prior experience, back when I was at CEB Gartner, we ran a study for looking at all knowledge workers. So we didn't break it up by function. And we found the same thing that Gallup found, which is your manager's the number one driver of retention. So that reality isn't new. But what makes a successful manager in today's work environment? Completely new. How engaging your team flexibly or remotely when you're not co-located with them in the same contact center, it's new, it's different, and it's not going anywhere. So that's the way of getting it right is what's changed.
Okay, so then the getting it right, and especially when you start talking about manager dynamic, even when, so like for me, talking about that evolution, I was responsible for, leadership development, mentoring and creating development programs. And we also have created an online learning community that has a multimodal approach to learning at callcentercoach.com. Is if you do the research on human learning, and the way we traditionally approach, developing of leaders, it's way out of whack. There's a massive gap in the way that we learn in regards to developing our leadership capabilities and competencies, versus what we do in trying to teach that. And also too, if you look at the research in regards to when, does a frontline supervisor actually get, any type of development at all, in their leadership skills and abilities, it comes 6 years after they're appointed the position.
Right.
Hello. I mean, how many people have we burned in that interim?
Yeah, how much opportunity have we missed? No, I couldn't agree with you more. Well, one of the fascinating things about our research is when we dug into that question of what does right and good look like from a manager dynamic perspective in this flexible, more distributed contact center environment, we actually found that some of the conventional wisdom around what makes an effective manager today is incomplete, I would say. And an example of that is we hear consistently from industry, from our clients, our community members, empathy training. That is where I think it's like 90% of executives plan to either maintain or increase their investment in empathy training for leaders into 2020 or in 2023, but into 2024 as well. And when we ran our analysis of manager outcomes, so being able to engage your team, overperform on retention rate targets within your team, and hit customer outcomes, and we regressed those outcomes against manager behaviors, came up with our 7 competency model for highly effective managers in today's contact center. Emotional intelligence was one of the competencies, but it was just one of the 7. And if we take it a step further, happy to talk more about this, but if we take it a step further, when you look at which of the 7 competencies has the biggest impact on likelihood of your direct report staying at your organization, it's not emotional intelligence, it's something else.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So when you say it's something else, what is the something else?
What is it? Exactly. So it's a competency called autonomy. And this autonomy competency is all about giving trust to your agents, gaining the trust of your agents. And essentially, to use the shorthand definition, it's enabling your team and yourself to deviate from process where necessary and where appropriate. And how contradictory, I think, to our core, especially if we've grown up in customer contact, is a competency like that, is a behavior like that. It's contradictory, right? Conventionalism in customer contact success is process, is efficiency. And what this competency is saying is when you empower your team to make judgment calls for themselves that get to the same result, get there efficiently, but perhaps are a process deviation, you're showing not only I trust you to make judgments, which is going to engage them, but you're also showing them I encourage your creativity about getting to the same result, perhaps in a different way, because maybe you'll identify a different and better way of doing things. So it's really fascinating because as flexibility has become more and more not just normalized, but valued by the workforce, right? It's about it's only 11% of the customer contact workforce that wants to work fully on site, which is pretty clear validation for flexible working. Having that autonomy in how you do your work and how you do your job is so valued by our direct reports. So it's that autonomy competency that rises to the top.
Well, okay. So what you just said right there, in the way that we explain it, and then the way that kind of works for me, and when I can actually convey it to others, it's the difference in helping people to learn how to think versus what to think.
Yes, you got it.
Now, when you start really diving into that, one of the critical factors in order to make that to happen, of course, let's just get beyond the changing of the mindset piece. Let's get away from the changing the approach set piece. It's also knowing that that's a journey and it takes time and everybody's at different starting points. Because then you start getting into the dynamic of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, do they have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? How do they learn? These are extremely complex issues. And so for me, even when you start talking about manager dynamic, it's like systems dynamics. It's, human dynamics. It's all these things. And I think the difficulty of it is what causes people to fail at it miserably.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's daunting.
How do we move forward with this?
How do we move forward with this? No, it's such a good point. And as you were talking, it was making me think of some of the other kind of key takeaways from our research on this, and personalization absolutely being one. Right? A manager who can more effectively engage their agents is going to be one who understands their individual differences, their direct reports' individual starting points. To your point, and personalization, I think, has been something we focused on as an industry from a CX perspective for a long time, but from the agent experience or EX or AX, whatever we want to call it, perspective, maybe less so. So personalization is daunting. And that's where our research comes in and gives our clients frameworks to get to about 80%, of personalization success through our employee segmentation model. It's a persona model to help you understand, hey, if you're the manager, we'll help you understand who on your team is at what different starting point across their competency models or across their aptitude for flexible working and so on.
Yeah. And I think part of what we're talking about is, also what we've come to learn in regards to the true drivers behind human motivation. In the contact center industry for, unfortunately, going back to the 40, 50 years and several decades. And also too, when you start looking at quite frankly, the big dollars, Susan Fowler, who has been with the Blanchard companies for a couple decades and is a brilliant mind, talks about that. What we do is a lot of motivation junk food, short-term, external based. And, we think that, hey, do this, get an award, pick this gift, and then therefore you're going to be engaged, is going to change our performance, and it's going to change our average tenure rates. And the fact is that those are short-term fixes that lead to longer-term problems. So if we were to say, with a particular, organization who is sitting there and they're struggling with all of these particular factors, what's a great starting point?
I think the best starting point is take stock of your current approach to agent engagement and fix, no, it's easier said than done, your managers, fix the type of flexibility you're offering, and fix your career paths for agents. We can figure those three things out. Our research shows you'll have a much higher agent engagement rate and thus agent retention rate.
Okay, so then if we start talking about operationalizing flexibility.
Yes, it's a mouthful, I know, I'm sorry.
But as you were talking and explaining that, I started thinking about the, organizations that have essentially adopted, like a 90% part-time model.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of them staffing, for example, with 10 full-timers, they will staff with 80 part-timers. But then I started thinking, especially when you look at a contact center, the daunting task of workforce management just now became, exponentially more challenging and difficult. And then we also start talking about the whole taxing that it puts on, your recruiting and interviewing activities and all of and I start thinking about the overall load and expense that has to now be undertaken that companies just never really realized before. So anyways, and maybe I'm thinking too much and too far. So let's just go back and explain operationalizing flexibility.
Certainly. So there's two types of flexibility broadly. There's the enterprise flexibility, which is what you're talking about around how flexible is our workforce. Are we offshoring, onshoring, outsourcing, insourcing, part-time, full-time, those org structure decisions, I'll say. But then there's the employee level flexibility. And that's really what we're talking about when we say operationalized flexibility, because offering flexibility to your employees that works for them is the second biggest driver of agent satisfaction and retention. When we say you're operationalizing flexibility, one of our biggest teaching points around this is that the flexibility equation is so much bigger than just we offer work from home or we offer hybrid. And I think, unfortunately, right now, understandably, this is new territory, right? We've been working in this model maybe for 2 years, but that's contrary to what most of us have been doing for a really long time. It feels easy and feels normal to say, hey, we offer hybrid work. We offer flexibility to our employees. Our research shows flexibility, it includes that work location factor, but it's also about flexibility in days worked, shifts worked, hours worked, but also flexibility in the type of work and the distribution of work that you're doing. So if you're an employee, you're an agent in a contact center, and you're doing highly complex calls and that's it all day, every day, you're never working on another channel, or you're never working in a varied degree of complexity, something a little bit more simple. That's not flexibility in the type of work that you do. And that can really contribute to agent burnout, which we know is a top concern for executives today. So I always encourage our leaders to think of flexibility as bigger than just the work location conversation, though that is an important factor to get right as well.
Well, and to me, you mentioned something you mentioned earlier, talking about the whole dynamic piece, and also as part of how it feeds into the retention. I start thinking about some people that's actually what they do want. I want to do the same thing every day, all day long, because for me, I feel like I'm in my comfort zone. I'm finding I'm finding my performance, zen, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, and if I do this for 20 years, I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fair point. And that comes back to the personalization piece of being able to more quickly as a leader identify who falls into that category and who falls into 1, 2, or 3 different other categories. And then just to bring it back too, without getting too meta, being able to offer an agent who falls in the category you're talking about an experience akin to that while offering their teammate a slightly different experience, that in and of itself is flexibility, right? Tailoring that experience to the individual a little bit more than perhaps we have historically.
Okay, so then, all right. For me, I start even thinking about the dynamics of size. So, for example, I mean, if I'm a smaller operation, I have under 50 people, I can't give that kind of flexibility because our hours of operation are from, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Those numbers don't jive.
Yeah.
But, how does that work?
How do we do it? No, it's a great question. One of the case studies and best practices that we've actually identified from our community is in those situations, finding ways to creep closer to offering flexibility, even if you can't get all the way there, the same way a contact center of 700 people can because of coverage and whatnot. So one strategy from our community is actually banking flexibility. The same way that employees for years have been banking PTO, you earn, as you work more, you earn certain days of paid holiday and paid time off. Well, we can also create a flexibility bank and saying, we know we're a small shop. We know that we're not going to be able to offer full flexibility day in and day out. We've got, coverage levels that we need to adhere to. But through good work, through hitting your metrics, through accomplishments and recognition, you can bank certain amounts of flexibility that you are able to redeem at a later date. So that might be, being able to, pass on a later shift or being able to leave early. And it's just another way of baking in flexibility into employee incentives and making it an expected and accessible part of the employee experience.
Okay, so then I think it's important for us to move on to the career development piece. And for me, as we were talking prior to us recording, and you were explaining this to me, I was like, well, it almost seems like what we're really talking about is career development versus skill development. So if you can, please lay that out for us.
Sure. So the emphasis in customer contact, and we know this, and it's a good emphasis, has for a while been on skill development. Do my employees have the hard skills and soft skills required to satisfy and delight customers, deliver an effortless experience, get to those customer outcomes, while also being efficient and having a good handle time and having a good first contact resolution? Skill development is important, but it only goes so far on that career development journey. And it only goes so far as what agents and employees in the customer contact workforce actually want. So to share a stat with you, when we looked at career development and we asked agents in the customer contact workforce, do you view your role in customer contact as a job or as a career? The majority of them said, I view my role as a career. Surprisingly, maybe unsurprisingly, this came as a shock to a lot of our kind of global heads of customer contact in our network, because I think for years we've perhaps assumed, resigned ourselves to, hey, when people come to work as an agent in customer contact, I might expect them to attrite in 2 years, 3 years. I don't expect them to be in it for the long haul. I know that this can maybe be more of a stepping stone than anything else. Well, the reality is, I think because of the normalization of flexible work and distributed work, people are now saying, hey, I can commit to this. I can commit to this role. I'm seeing the transferable skills I get from customer contact. I want to have a career here, and I want to know what that path looks like. And I need to see that path set out, not just from these are the skills you'll develop perspective, but these are the opportunities you will have. And these are the parts of the business you could perhaps positively attrite to once you have acquired the skills needed in customer contact, right? So that lends toward long-term, what type of professional will I develop into from my role in customer contact? That's what agents today want. And we can't, we can't overlook that, because it is the third biggest driver of agent satisfaction.
Well, as you're talking, I start thinking about the data that oftentimes we interpret drives a certain perception. Mm-hmm. And if we're looking at, like you're saying, that average agent tenure metric, and you're making an assumption because from strategic planning purposes, I have to think about what as an organization that means, that's also how people think. That's where the flaw comes into play. And a lot, when you keep referring and talking about enterprise and global heads and global leads, and I'm like, they're 8 levels removed from the front line.
Totally.
They're trying to drive an organization with a lack of awareness and understanding of actually what happens from day to day. To me, I think that's probably one of the most significant gaps of all, especially when you start talking about organizational size. And I think there's learnings from that for those people. as well as, for that smaller organization in regards to, hey, don't let certain data drive your perception of what the reality is. And I would dare to say, even as I say that, you're shaking your head, you're probably like, oh, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
What are a couple of things that stand out in order to make, again, make a different outcome?
Yes, well, that's a big value prop of our research, which is for the global head executive, for someone who's maybe 8 levels removed from the front line. When you're struggling with an agent engagement challenge, our research gives you the answers. So it's been really fun and rewarding for us to be that purveyor of insight that maybe just otherwise wouldn't have. But that aside, like coming back to your core question, one of the biggest takeaways on this career development piece has been there's an assumption out there that career development is better delivered when we're in person. And if people are working fully remote or more hybrid, it stands to reason that they would have a tougher time getting mentorship and getting maybe opportunities to promotion because of that relative lack of face time, maybe relative to people who are on site or co-located and whatnot. When we look at customer contact data and we look at agent satisfaction with different elements of career development, so opportunities for promotion, training and education, mentorship, utilization of skills in a variety of contexts, all those kind of things that go along with career development. We broke out that satisfaction data by agents working on site, agents working hybrid, and agents working remotely. And it was the on-site agents who had the lowest levels of satisfaction with those career development attributes. So career development and flexibility are not at all inherently at odds. What it does mean is that career development mentoring in a virtual context probably looks a little bit different, right? And it requires more frequent, shorter touch points as opposed to, maybe a once quarterly lunch or whatever, we might be used to in when we're all co-located and in person. So while it might require a different approach, when you take that different approach, it actually results in higher levels of agent satisfaction on career development for those hybrid and remote agents.
Okay. So, as you were saying that, I think some of the things in regards to manager dynamic and all of that stuff, you start seeing how the behaviors and practices, of leaders at all levels, even the ones that are 8 levels removed, is, to me, that's where, a lot of these challenges are causing what could be referred to as seismic.
Yes.
You need to take a step back. I mean, even, you started talking about emotional intelligence. Well, I became certified as an emotional intelligence practitioner because I realized that I was having to spend more time on those types of things.
Yes.
But and also too, when you start talking about the other competencies, and so, we've identified a business acumen competency, a collaborative relationship competency, all of those things, all of that is interwoven within all of that. And I think I want to take a second also to talk about the difference between competencies and skills, because I think oftentimes those are misconstrued. Is if you think about just the word coach and what a coach does, a coach, that's a skill, right? And it relies on competencies in order to, for it to be most effective. And there's varying competencies associated with that. And those have to be developed for me to be a better coach and have the skill of being a coach. So how do you break down the whole competency piece and then skill, a component? Because we even talked about career development versus skill development. It doesn't say skill development goes away.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
I mean, it's just a very different, approach that we need to take. And then also too, when we start talking about career development, understand that it's a journey and not everybody's at the exact same starting point.
Oh, for sure. So many things to kind of react to there. To your point just now around not everyone's starting from the same place. That's why I come back to the importance of personalization, not just in how you structure flexibility and offer flexibility to your employees, but also how you paint their career path and how you set their expectations around career development. Across our employee segmentation model, which segments people into 5 different personas in today's customer contact workforce, each of the 5 personas has a different top 3 career development motivators. So it's actually been a lot of fun to say, hey, we appreciate if you have 700 people in your contact center, it would be very inefficient to have 700 versions of what career development looks like, as perfect as that would be. So our segmentation model on a persona basis comes in and says, we're going to get you 80% of the way there, map your 700 people to one of those 5 segments and help you build out that career development program based on the motivations that correspond to each persona. Without going into too much detail there, like to your other points around competencies versus skills and the soft skills versus the hard skills and all of that, our competency model, coming back to the competency model for leaders, it's 7 competencies. Each competency is comprised of 4 to 5 behaviors. And I would say 2 of our competencies in the leadership model are maybe like on the harder skills side of things, and the remaining 5 are on the softer side of things, because so much of leadership today is around the how you lead the team, the how you engage with people, the how you work, rather than the am I compliant to the customer service process that's going to ensure my team hits their AHC target, right? So it's been a lot of fun breaking that out. And speaking of certifications, we can actually certify leaders in our competencies. So we see a lot of value in that too.
Okay, man, you're talking about those, even though we're talking about only 3.
I know, it's a big conversation. It's huge. And that's why it's so tough.
Most definitely. Somebody the other day, as there was this, I was having a discussion. They were referencing something about, human outcomes and behavior and things like that. And somebody chimes up and said, well, what's our goal? And they said to be perfect. I'm like, oh, that's not humans.
You're always setting yourself up to fail if you aim to be perfect. For sure.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. We are error-prone machines, and animals. I mean, it is what it is, and what we have to do is reduce the variability and understand the nuances and the differences, and that's just going to take time. And so when I think about the research, when I think about what you're doing with crypto and Web3, and you're trying to demask, and that word was tough for me. That was like saying aluminum.
That's okay. Yeah.
But it's when I look at all that, I'm saying, okay, well, what's a goal that Nicole has?
Yeah, gosh, it's such a great question. And let me be perfectly clear, my gender equity advocacy, financial inclusion advocacy, that it's not in the scope of what I do with customer management practice, but it is a passion of mine. And to your point, there's a common factor that, kind of has resulted in me being a researcher, which is curiosity. So I would say one of my leadership goals, lifelong goals, is just to learn as much as possible and pay that forward. So when it comes to customer contact research questions, I'm trying to discover and learn the answer to this core question of how do I engage agents in today's flexible work environment? I'm going to find that answer and I'm going to teach it back to the people who need to know. On my, kind of more personal side, gender equity, financial inclusion, crypto, and Web3, I am so curious about what the economy is going to look like in, not even 10 years, in 2 years, probably at the rate of change. I want to know, and I want to help other people get out in front of these transformative technologies, whether blockchain or something else that's going to change the way commerce works and the way people can set themselves up for financial security or not, like what the risks are. So yeah, I think curiosity is just a common trait of mine across all the various lines of inquiry I follow. And my goal is just to learn as much as I can and pay it forward.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. All right, Here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Nicole, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Nicole Kyle, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready.
All right. So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Self-doubt.
What is the greatest leadership advice you have ever received?
Do not take advice from people from whom you would not seek it.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Listening.
All right, here's one. This one might be a little bit of a challenge for you because it may not have been too long ago. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you have been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Does confidence qualify? Okay, confidence.
And why?
While self-doubt is something I still struggle with, as many do, as I said a second ago, I am more confident today than I was at 25. And I think confidence just allows you, a healthy dose, just allows you to break free of those things holding you back and put yourself out there and take risks that perhaps you talk yourself out of when you're a little bit less confident.
Nicole, I've had a great time chatting with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Nicole Kyle. I'm over there on LinkedIn. You can please engage with CMP Research, cmpresearch.com. We have a couple of free white papers that you're able to download to get a bit of a sense of what we do here at CMP Research to help customer contact executives make better decisions faster. I appreciate you having me on, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Nicole Kyle, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and helping us all get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.